Here I want to thank Mr. Warren Buffett. He came out the last couple of weeks since we met last in April by saying that he's disappointed with his fellow billionaires for pushing so hard on Mr. Trump and the Republicans to lower the corporate income tax rate. And Mr. Buffett says, this is crazy. And here's the argument he gives. He says 30 years ago, corporate taxes amounted to 4% of the total value of goods and services produced in the United States, what we call the GDP. So corporate taxes were 4%. He says today, corporate taxes are 2% of the GDP. In other words, the real portion of our production that the corporations have to pay in tax is half what it was 30 years ago. That's a hefty tax cut they've already enjoyed. This is the way it is before any of these cuts proposed by Mr. Trump and the GOP get voted on. Then Mr. Buffett does a very interesting thing. He says, that's not the real problem for the United States. He says the real problem for American business, listen to him, is the absurd cost of health care. Oh, how does he explain that? He says, well, 30 years ago, the total cost of the health care of the United States, that's 4 industries: doctors, hospitals, the producers of drugs and medical devices, and the medical insurance companies. Those are the 4 industries which, if you put them together, could be called, and I would urge you to do that, the medical industrial complex. It's the analogy to Dwight Eisenhower's military industrial complex. We have a medical industry. Those 4 industries work out very nicely with one another, which is why we end up paying what? 25 years ago, 5% of the GDP of America went for health care. Today, 17%. So whereas the tax burden dropped by half, the cost for medical care went up 4 times. Wow. Why is Mr. Warren Buffett worried? He says because United States companies have to compete with the rest of the world, and the American companies are spending a fortune paying for the hospitals and the doctors and the drugs and the medical devices and the insurance. It's hurting business. He's angry as a businessman that one group of companies has a stranglehold on something everybody else has to pay for. The United States spends more on these 4 industries, the healthcare industries, than any other industrial country. No other country comes close to spending what we do. And the medical outcomes in the United States are mediocre. Our longevity, the length of life that Americans have, is about in the middle. It's not the best, not the worst, it's in the middle. What happens to young children in the first year of life, the illnesses they have, the length of time in the hospital, all of those kinds of issues, we're medium. Now, folks, if what you're getting is a medium level product, but you're paying more than anybody else in the world for that stuff, you'd know something is wrong. You don't need a PhD for this.